Hello and welcome to Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. It means a lot to me that you've joined us for this episode. Michael Greenburg, Stargate SG-1 executive producer and writer, is joining us for this episode. I had Michael on for a brief amount of time, not nearly long enough. We spent half an hour talking, and I wasn't able to use all of it. But there's two segments: one in the main conversation, remembering Don S. Davis, and then a follow-up piece about half an hour long. Both of them are linked in the description below, so that you can go and watch them, where he shared his memories of Don. He was one of the key people responsible for the day-to-day operations on the set of Stargate SG-1 for the first 8 seasons, I believe, of the first 8 seasons, for 8 seasons of the show. And it means the world to me that he has taken time to come on and join us for what turned out to be about an hour and 45-minute conversation of his life and his body of work. And so I invite you to join us for the next couple of hours to settle in and hear the story of one of the key producers who were responsible for bringing so much of what we enjoy and love as fans to the screen. And to help me do that, I am bringing in a friend of mine, Kate Ritter of rdanderson.com, to help me fill in some of the MacGyver details where that partnership with Richard Dean Anderson began. So let's go ahead and bring them in. I am privileged today to welcome back 2 key pieces of the Stargate puzzle. Michael Greenburg, executive producer of Stargate SG-1, writer of a couple of our most favorite episodes, and director in his own right. Welcome back to Dial the Gate, sir. It's a privilege to have you.
Pleasure.
And
Pleasure.
I'm also privileged to have Kate Ritter of rdanderson.com, who has just celebrated 35 years of a correspondence with Richard Dean Anderson that has grown into this massive online resource for MacGyver and Stargate fans. Kate, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you guys here, because I really wanted to start off with talking a little bit about MacGyver first before we get into everything. Kate, how are things going with rdanderson.com? What's in the hopper? What are your current plans? I know we talked a little bit offline about what your focus has been lately, but what's going on?
Well, I do still plan to work more on the MacGyver lexicon, which keeps getting set aside as I work on other projects. But mostly it's become an archive since Rick is retired. He sends messages every now and then, and we get little bits of updates, and he does conventions. But there's not so much new material to add to that. So a lot of it is going back and archiving things from the past.
Absolutely. And well, I appreciate you being here to help me interview Michael for the first half of this show, because MacGyver is so critical a piece to the puzzle in his career in terms of bringing Stargate up to speed later. Michael, how is South Africa? How are things going? And yeah, just bring us up to speed real quick.
Yeah, well, I just spent 6 weeks with my daughter in South Africa, where she's working and studying. She's taking care of animals, rehabbing, rewilding animals there. Most recently, the big 5 type animals, but before that, she was involved with like 7 different species of monkeys. So that's her passion. She's like a little Jane Goodall. Yeah. But it was her 25th birthday, so we went down to Cape Town and had a fantastic time.
Beautiful part of the world. If
Yeah.
anyone listening, if you ever get a chance to travel, I mean, it's a beautiful part of the world. Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled to have you back, sir. Kate, do you have the notes that you built here in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. If you would like, I invite you to go ahead and start us off. I am not particularly good at creating questions in advance, so I effectively, this was not the intent, pawned this one off to her, and it was like, well, because it starts off with your earlier career, Mike, anyway, and I wanted to give her first dibs at approaching this conversation. So, Kate, if you don't mind, getting us started.
Sure. Well, it's good to see you, Mike. I was thinking back, I visited the MacGyver set a couple of times, but I don't believe you were on-set director or a producer at that time. So I don't think we actually met until Stargate.
I was on set from the beginning of, well, the end of season 1, beginning of season 2 of MacGyver in LA. So I was on set ever since then. So that was probably 1986. Yeah.
But we were on location the times I visited, and I don't remember actually having a chance to talk to you. So now's my chance to talk MacGyver.
Yeah.
Was this in LA, Kate?
In LA or Vancouver?
Both. The first time was in Vancouver. We were out at the pier on location. And the second time we were at, somewhere downtown in LA.
Well, I was there, but I was probably staring at a monitor.
Probably.
Not talking to very many people.
Well,
on
by the time you and I got to talk, we were talking Stargate. So this is a chance to talk a little bit about MacGyver.
Absolutely.
Would you like to talk about how you got involved? I mean, we've all heard the story of how Rick got involved. He wore his glasses at the audition and he was hired. But I don't think, from what you've said in the past, I don't think that you were actually involved in any of that. You came onto the show later.
Right.
So you want to talk about that and how you caught up with Rick?
Well, I was at Warner Brothers. When MacGyver started, I was at Warner Brothers with Newman England Productions, Paul Newman and George England. And during my stint there, Steve Downing was actually at Warner Brothers running the show TJ Hooker. And then, and so we got to be friends because our offices were right near each other at Warner Brothers. And then Steve wrote and produced a pilot called Hollywood Star, starring Sharon Stone. And that was the obvious connection because Sharon and I were married. And so that's when I really got to know Steve. And then dissolved to, I don't know, a few months later, MacGyver was they were going over budget on the first season significantly, and I got a call from Steve. Would I be interested in coming over to Paramount from Warner Brothers to help get the show back on track? And then I got a follow-up call from Mike Schoenbroom, who I don't know if you remember, but he was head of production for Paramount back then. And I had known him when I was at USC Film School. So we had a relationship. And so they both asked if I would come over and meet with them and Henry Winkler and John Rich and talk about, what I would do to get MacGyver back on track. Financially and a little bit creatively, I guess. So that's how that evolved. I thought I was just going to go over there for a few months, and it ended up to be 8 years. So it was supposed to be a couple-month thing. Then I was going to go back to Warner Brothers and live happily ever after. But anyway, I ended up staying at Paramount, and kind of the rest is history. That old cliche. But I think that what clicked, what I remember in the interview with Henry and what we became in sync with, and then Rick also and I became in sync with, was at the time, I don't know if you remember the first season, but there was a lot of voiceover. Rick was spending a lot of time in the ADR sessions, studios, voiceovering pretty much everything that MacGyver was doing on camera. And I immediately chimed in my initial meeting with the big wigs over there. I said, to me, it sounds like a radio show. show. It looks like a radio show if you're visualizing it, and it sounded like a radio show because he's telling the audience everything he's doing to the point of spreading open a paperclip. And so I kind of bumped on that because of the visual filmmaker in me, and I said that,
Yeah.
you don't have to be telling the audience what you're doing because they're seeing it.
Yeah, he's not doing
And
a cooking show. They're not practicing it at home in front of the TV.
yeah, so I think that that alone, as I recall, endeared us all together,
Ah,
and we, started to move forward. And Rick was spending less and less time on the ADR stage, and we were able to attack each story and each, filming day in that manner. Showing the story,
wow.
having it evolve on screen instead of in voice. Yeah.
No, he hated doing those voiceovers because it took up so
Yeah.
much time. And he's
Yeah. I
the
mean,
only main cast you had, so he had to be there every day for the acting too. Yeah.
yeah, I remember my first day was at the Queen, the QE2 ship out in Long Beach, and I went out there to meet with him for the first time. And when I went into his motorhome, he immediately, gave me a big hug and thanked me for being
Right.
there. So that was day one. So, and then it just evolved from there. So it was quite a fun ride, but a lot of hard work, but fun ride.
Well, you mentioned creative input, and there was quite a difference in tone between the first season and the second season. In the first season, MacGyver was sort of this lone wolf government agent that got called in when nobody else could do the job. And by second season, he was now an employee of a think tank, and there was a different focus. Was that part of your decision making as well?
On, I don't think so. The Phoenix Foundation was I think it was Steve Downing's idea. I'm not 100% sure, and I don't want to, annoy any of the other writers. But I remember discussions back, we're going back a few years, Kate, right? But I think that it was Steve Downing's uh, idea. I'm not sure. The Phoenix Foundation, because he felt it important to have a franchise location that stories could emanate from, like the CIA um, or DARPA, a think tank, something like that that you could root the stories in, at least for the beginning, kind of like, a Mission Impossible, tape, something that the story, a place where the stories could emanate from, you know.
And have higher stakes as a
And you also,
result.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, higher stakes, yeah, international world, stories.
and even that changed over the years. Is when the show started, it was the Cold War, and we had very clear, good guys and bad guys, and international missions. And when the wall came down and the Cold War was ending, you needed to redirect your focus a little bit. So there was more social issues, more
Right.
environmental issues, that sort of thing. Who was behind some of that direction or the
Well,
change in?
we had such a great writing staff. I mean, we had so many great, talented, creative writers and producers with Steve and Henry Winkler and John Rich at the top, and then guys like Steve Cronish, who went on to do The Commish and
Yeah.
various other big series. So there was a lot of brain power there. And we, like you sort of hinted at, we decided to do a mix of storytelling. We did 4 or 5 Save the Animal shows. We had a relationship with Last Chance for Animals, um, that group of lawyers in LA. So we would, each year decide on certain, endangered species that we were going to tackle and tell stories about, like the black rhino, the um the spotted owl, the gray wolf, the American eagle. We did some pretty fabulous, save the animal stories, which would make my daughter very happy. And I even got handwritten letters from people like Grace Slick from the Jefferson Airplane thanking us for doing those types of shows. And yeah, very rewarding. And yeah, and as you probably know, we ended up winning the first environmental film award, like you hinted at on the environment. So, and we were given that award by Robert Redford. Rick and I were there on stage with him accepting the award. So, yeah, it was very rewarding series and iconic series at this point. I mean, to this day, I'm associated with MacGyver, and people are always talking about it. It's so many people's favorite show. I mean, I just was in South Africa, like David said, and with my daughter Kenya, and we got her a car, and the car dealer brought up MacGyver. The salesman brought up MacGyver as saying that it was his, and he was from India, and saying that it was his favorite show growing up. So
Did you
it's,
guys prompt this in any way?
huh?
Did you guys prompt this in any way? Did you mention your background? And then he was like,
I
"Oh
think
yes,
I,
that's
yeah, I think so.
okay."
I
But
can't
he
remember how
knew.
it came up. Yeah, no, I don't think he Googled me or anything like
Okay.
that, but maybe he has since. But I forget how it came up in conversation, and then yeah, his reaction was, "That's my favorite show as a kid. I grew up with it." Yeah, so
Wow.
it's MacGyver's out there. You know, it's in the dictionary, right? The Oxford Dictionary, the Webster. It's in the. It's now part of the lexicon of the world. So, and
I
I hear about it all the time.
It's also, and I can see it through my website because I get lots of email from fans. And it's not just the people who grew up with the show who still consider it a favorite. It's people who are discovering it now in their teens and their 20s, and people who are born long after the show went off the air and still consider it a favorite. So it really is timeless in that respect.
Yeah, I wish I had a percentage of the profits.
I
Yeah,
You had,
it is
yeah, go
timeless.
ahead.
It's great, great storytelling is timeless.
yeah,
If you tell a great story, it's timeless, and that's what we try to do day in and day out.
for sure. There's so I cards on the table. I grew up watching the show, but very casually. So my knowledge of the first time that I really paid close attention to Rick was a TV movie called Pandora's Clock, which I was just fascinated with. But I was still very cognizant of who he was with MacGyver. So Michael, I wasn't entirely sure of the birth of the real kinship between the two of you because you were on set with him every day,
Yeah.
so making this show happen. What do you think was the alchemy between the two of you that made it so that it was like, okay, this is a the beginning of a partnership that is going to last in ended up lasting into the future. What do you think was that alchemy, that connection? Did you guys just get each other? Was there just a casual shorthand that developed right away? Because I want to see how
It
this
wasn't
all
right
leads
away.
forward. Okay.
It wasn't right away, but I think over time, over the first season and maybe the first couple seasons, he saw the shared sensibility that we each had for dialogue, action, storytelling, rewriting his, or polishing, I should say, not rewriting, but polishing some of his dialogue and polishing some of his actions on camera. We shared a common sensibility for the MacGyver character and Rick's portrayal of that character that I think clicked. So he basically knew that I had his back and was supportive in what he was doing in character, and even when he would branch out and do stuff um, a little different than the character, like when we did those westerns and he created that MacGyver character, which evolved into, kind of the philosophy of Legend, the series we did
Mm-hmm.
after or before Stargate. So he knew that he could trust me to sort of be there for him and shepherd the production and filming whichever direction he went in, because I trusted him, he trusted me.
Mhm.
So there was the common trust there. And then we would work with the director of the episode and the cinematographer, whether it was um, Bill Garrity, uh,
Yeah.
you know, and and then all the guys that followed, and then the different directors that came and went each episode because they changed. We didn't deal with one director all the time. The directors were constantly changing, every 7, 8 days. It's a new director. So I was the constant person who was always there. And kind of, with Rick and I, we held the reins of this it's like driving a six up you know, horse wagon where you've got reins in each hand and you're, trying to control it all going down the road. But the two of us just sort of, kept it together and with a lot of help from our episodic directors, our cinematographers, and the 250 other crew members that we got to be a family that
Yeah.
just worked 24/7, 365 for 8 seasons on MacGyver. Well, 7 seasons and then 2 TV movies in London. Yeah.
Wow.
And we even got the London crew to think that way and work that way. So becomes contagious on the set, really. And I've heard about that a lot from a lot of people that have worked with us, over the years, and I've run back into. So yeah, I mean, it's it can be a very impactful business when it's done right.
For sure. Kate?
But you've talked about your being on the set all the time and kind of overseeing everything. And you've referred to yourself as a filmmaker rather than a writer or a producer or a director or all the various hats you've worn.
Yeah.
How do you describe that kind of role? Is it like
Well,
juggling all these different roles, or is it a different vision, a different approach to something? How do you see yourself
right.
different as a filmmaker?
Well, the Oxford Dictionary says a filmmaker is someone who produces and directs film for theaters and television.
Yeah.
So it's that simple. I don't look at myself as like maybe what you're thinking about is a Steven Spielberg or Francis Ford Coppola or those kind of or Scorsese filmmaker. I'm more it's more definitive for me. It's more that's just what I do. That's
Yeah.
just like, I might as well be a mechanic. But it's
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's not, I don't look at being called a filmmaker. I mean, I refer to myself as a filmmaker because that's what I do for a living. And it's basically in the dictionary as that, just producing and directing films for theaters and television. So maybe not that glamorous is what you're thinking of. For me, it's more nuts and bolts, but it's being conversant. For me, it's being I mean, I went to film. I started studying film when I was in high school.
Mm.
I had a best friend, Kenny Nye, who we formed a little company together called Big Pics, which I still use as my company today. Unfortunately, he passed away in a car accident when we were young, but I continued that, our company forward to this day. I still use it. But I started making films with him when we were in high school, and we did his father was president of the Presbyterian Church, and he gave us this budget to do this film called The History of the Presbyterian Church, which we did for ABC Directions. That was really my first, go around in the filmmaking process because Kenny was directing, I was his assistant director, but I also had to run the sound some days because the sound guy didn't show up. So and then I went to USC, and that's where I got more into it. And after USC, I got a opportunity to be on the World Pro Skiing circuit for a ski company, Kesley Skis, Nordica Boots, and Look Bindings. running a ski team. Um, at 3 years traveling around the world. This is right when I graduated USC, so 1973, 4, 5, and 6. I was and I was on this ski tour handling this pro ski team day in and day out. And we were being filmed a lot by the different networks, ABC for one. Um, and um, and the reason I bring that up is because, as David knows, later in my life, well, the last 10 years, I've been producing and directing film series for the National Hockey League, the NHL, Quest for the Stanley Cup, Road to the Winter Classic, um, Wired, NHL Revealed, because my brother, Ross Greenburg, the two-time Hall of Famer, Ross Greenburg, and he's in the Boxing Hall of Fame and the Television Hall of Fame. He was in 2012. He was named the head of original programming for the NHL, and because when he had left HBO, but he at HBO he had a series called 24/7, which was a behind the scenes series that was pretty successful in the world of boxing, leading up to the big boxing matches that he would do. Um, and he's also in the Boxing Hall of Fame. So this was after Stargate. He asked me to come on board to be the guy on set producing and directing these series, Quest for the Stanley Cup, Road to the Winter Classic, Wired, like I said, NHL Revealed. And it was actually, to bring it all around, it was actually my, 3 seasons on the World Pro Skiing Tour that got me, intimately involved with seeing how behind the scenes actually worked from the pro athlete's point of view. So when I was given, the camera to shoot those kind of shows, I kind of had 3 years of knowledge of what it was like behind the scenes and how to approach the professional athletes and the coaches. So it sort of all came full circle. That's probably way more information that you were looking for, Kate, but uh, that's the genesis.
Really thinking in terms of Spielberg or Lucas or any of those guys.
Yeah.
I was thinking that a filmmaker needs to be able to manage everybody's job at once. You need to know how to do
Yeah.
the lighting and the sound and the.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if you're seeing things globally rather than a narrow focus on what a director does or a
Yeah.
producer,
No, that's a good
how you
point.
interpreted that.
No, that's a good point. You're right. And I think that if there's anything that I'm known for, and the reason that I was, I think, successful at the major studios like Warner Brothers, Paramount, and then MGM, is because the heads of production knew that I was conversant in all, say, 100, aspects of the filmmaking process, that they knew that if they hired me, I knew how to take raw stock in the day. Now it's digital chips, but how they knew that I was conversant with all the processes and knew that I could actually deliver something of quality at the end. So,
Mm.
uh, you know, that's probably why I got the jobs. You
Can
know,
can you tell me? I'm very curious. Actually, you and I met for the first time in 2003 at a GateCon event.
I remember I had dark
You
hair.
do? You remember
Yeah,
me?
yeah, I do. I remember the interview. I remember the whole thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was the next
Fun.
year. Yes.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
we
that was the
met
next
we actually
year.
met a year before I was in line to see you, and
Oh,
I asked you
oh,
one
okay.
question and I said,
What was the question?
"Why Gekko?" And you told me
Oh,
a brief little
ah,
story, but
this
Kate
is a good
actually teed
story.
this up here. How
This is a
did
good
it
story.
come about?
Okay,
Yeah,
this is a really good story. You're
yeah.
gonna love this. Well, Rick and I, when we decided to form a company, the first name we came up with, because Rick had this kind of stuffed doll that was a pig dog. So Rick thought that would be a great name for a production company, Pig Dog Productions. So we went with that until our agent, Lee Brillstein, said, I'm not sure that's a great name for your production company. Not sure you're going to be taken very seriously. So anyway, we pondered that for a while, but then we were on a hiatus in Tahiti together because that's what we used to do. We'd have a couple weeks off between seasons. And one year we went to Tahiti, and there was this moment where Rick was lying on his back, and a gecko jumped onto his stomach and then crawled up his stomach toward his chest and looked up at Rick, and Rick made eye contact with the gecko, and they made eye contact and related, and then the gecko took off. And then I think it was the next day, Rick said, he told me about this encounter.
Yeah.
And then we looked into the myth and legend of a gecko. And in Tahiti, the geckos are known for keeping one eye on the road and one eye on the future. Their eyes can actually move independently of each other. One, they can move up, and the left one can move up, the right one can move down. So the legend is they keep one eye on the road and one eye on the future. And we thought that would be a good name for a company. And that's how Gekko happened. Pretty good, huh? And no one's ever asked that before, at least of me, but maybe Rick has told people. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's
So,
little moments like that that define us, and when you're given a gift like that in nature,
yeah.
you run with it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You touched on one other thing I was going to go back to.
Yeah.
You were talking about fan feedback. And again, comparing from the MacGyver era in the 80s, before anyone had computers or cell phones, to Stargate, when all of that was very prevalent, you got instant feedback. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with the fans during MacGyver? How did you get feedback? How did you hear what fans wanted? And then did that influence you in any way in directions of
Um,
stories?
yeah. I mean, like I mentioned the Gray Slick fan thing. So, I mean, we didn't have a big we were working so much, as you know. It was so 24, it felt like 24/7, 365. It's just we were either on the set or in a writing room or a conference room or the art department. We were either conceptualizing stuff, writing stuff, rewriting stuff, breaking stuff down, deciding how we were going to shoot things with the different directors and cameramen and stuff. So we were so consumed by the process, we didn't have a lot of interaction with the public. Rick did when he would go out and do stuff. But as far as us, in the company and on set, we didn't have a lot of interaction, but the times that we did were very meaningful. Like I said, the Save the Animal
Mm.
episodes really got a lot of attention. So we would get at that time, before emails and stuff, we'd get a lot of letters. We had great PR people that would, tell us about stuff. Um, um, and then we did that episode, The Runaway, and we created the first Runaway Hotline. That was MacGyver created that. That started with MacGyver in what was it? Probably our third season, maybe, or fourth season. But that whole 1-800 Runaway phone number for kids who were, either abused at home and out running away and homeless. They had a phone line to call. We started that. So, I mean, yeah, it was an impactful show. But as far as fan feedback, yeah, that it wasn't in my loop. Maybe Henry Winkler would know more about that than I, because he was out there a lot talking to fans and people because of his appearances and stuff. But I didn't appear anywhere except for on the set.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I bring it up because it was partly how I got involved with the show. I was a teacher, and so I saw the impact that the show had on kids. And my students wrote letters as part of a letter writing exercise in the language arts and got an answer from Rick. And that was how the whole thing started. And so I had opportunities to talk to people in the production office, or in the front office rather. And I did hear some stories about letters you got from teachers and from environmental organizations, but I didn't know how that filtered down and might have influenced where the show was going.
Well, I'm sure it was a big influence. And I remember when you started there. I remember that. I remember those I remember those times. And I think that probably they would go to Steve, from either to Henry or to Steve Downing, and then they would get deciphered down to the writing staff, myself, as potential storylines. Yeah.
I really wanted to know, Mike, what is, how do I want to put this? When you were producing MacGyver, was there ever an issue of, gosh, we've done this now. How do we come up with another way to get him out of a box? Did you ever feel like through that run of that series, if we keep attacking it this way, this is going to seem like really unrealistic, or was it just the dynamic of the show? Like this was the kind of configuration of this series. He would encounter a problem and have to come up with a way to get himself out of it? Or was it always like, oh man, we've got so many ideas for how to do this coming in, we just need to pick one? What was it kind of, that was probably more the creative side of things, but as an exercise on set, you were watching these things happen. And which MacGyverism was your favorite?
Well, we worked that stuff out months before filming,
Okay.
usually. But I'll tell you some, some fun stuff. But yeah, so we were fortunate to have advisors like John Koivula and John Potter. Potter was the guy that I worked with closely, and his expertise is in creating clean rooms for nuclear facilities. He's a genius. And so, the writers and myself and Steve would get together months before the season started, and we would start hammering out ideas and boxing MacGyver into certain situations
Mm.
that we felt needed a lot of prep time to figure out either the chemistry or physics of it all to that we would have to tackle on the day. But that's months in advance, so it was pretty well prepped.
Okay.
Occasionally something wouldn't work, and I'll tell you one funny thing that happened on a stage at Paramount in LA, seventh season, I think, um, was a MacGyverism didn't a gunshot. He was going to do he had to come up with a way to do a gunshot, and he was adverse to guns, no guns ever, in MacGyver's hands or anything. He didn't believe in them. That was a big concept of the
Yeah.
character show, but he needed a distraction of a gunshot. And it might have been Rick who came up with this idea. I don't even remember, but I was standing with him, and he was in a warehouse on a set on stage at Paramount, and he took like a 2x4 piece of wood, and he held it in his hand like this, and then with his foot on the bottom part of it, and he let go of the hand and slammed it down, and in the soundstage, it sounded just like a gunshot. So we went with that. So that happened like at gunpoint, so to speak, because we were filming it right there, and we needed a gunshot distraction to get a bad guy going the other direction. So so some stuff happened spontaneously, and some stuff was months before. Yeah, but we had the fortunate ability to have guys like John Potter in our hip pocket, and I had him on, my favorite speed dial to call if I ever needed, some help on the set because something wasn't happening or working. Yeah.
Were you,
So we had a lot of great minds at work there. Like I said, it took
wow.
250 people to do it.
Were you ever saying to yourself, nah, this is not going to do what they say it's going to do? Were you ever blown away by something that you saw in Video Village? It's just like,
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see if this is going to do what everyone says scientifically and physics wise and everything else this is going to
Yeah.
do.
You know what really blew my mind? I forget the episode, you probably know, or Kate. There was an episode where was it out of a cake or something that these darts had to fly out, multiple darts around a circular, I think it was a cake or something. Um, and um, MacGyver set it off, and I don't even remember why or how or what the scene was, but I remember being blown away because to capture that MacGyverism moment, we had to find a camera that could shoot 600 frames per second
Oh
at the time. Now, this is before digital, this is with film. So we had to find, yeah, we had to find a photosonic camera, which Jim Menard had. And Jim
God.
Menard ended up becoming one of our cinematographers on
Yes.
Stargate, as you know. But it was Jim, that was how we met Jim Menard. He had the photosonic camera that gave us the ability to actually see these darts fly out from this MacGyverized cake or something. And that blew my mind because we had the camera mounted, from the ceiling down to get the darts spraying out. And I was concerned that,
Wow.
oh shit, at 30
Yeah.
frames per second, 60 frames, or even 90 frames per second, you're not going to see these darts. And because I knew about frame rate and
Yeah.
slow-mo and super slow-mo.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally had to find a camera that could shoot 600 frames per second to do that. So yeah, that still etched in my mind. I haven't thought of that in 30 years, but yeah.
Kate, do you recall the scene he's talking about?
I think it was the birdcage,
Yeah,
the musical birdcage or something,
yeah,
and with
you're right.
yeah,
Was there a
there
cobra?
was some,
Was there
yeah, I
a
was just going to
snake?
say there was a snake involved,
Yeah,
and
Oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah,
Please, I'm going to look up this episode afterward. I want to see
yeah,
this. That,
yeah, yeah,
that,
I think
yeah. Yeah,
wow.
season.
right, Kate. Yeah, you're right.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's something.
I hadn't heard that story before though about
yeah,
the camera.
uh-huh.
The,
Yep. And that's how I met Jim Menard. And then
wow.
dissolved to, so that was probably 1988,
Yeah.
89, something like that. Then dissolved to 1996, 7 Stargate. We hired Jim to be one of our alternating cinematographers.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the number of behind the scenes talent that you guys brought with you from one production to the other. In some
Yeah.
respects, it's like there wasn't really a, yeah, from the people that I've talked with, in some respects, it was like, one day they were shooting MacGyver, and on the other day they were shooting, the next, a couple days
Yeah.
later they were shooting SG-1. Uh, so many of those people behind that camera, who did you rely on we've mentioned Jim, that you brought with you into Stargate?
Dan Shea, stunt coordinator, Dan Shea, one of our best friends and always delivered. Basically, when you're with people for so long and they deliver quality, you stick with them. At least I do.
That's right.
But I think everyone in the business does. I mean, everyone does. I mean, the great filmmakers, they all stick with their people who deliver for them. I mean, Spielberg's known for that.
Yeah.
Scorsese's known for that. But even, you know, television producers who, when you have department heads or anybody on set that delivers quality day in, day out, and they're there for you through thick and thin, you bring them back because why mess with success? Just bring them back. So yeah, Scott Atia in stunts, Jim Menard. I, I'd have to think about who
I
else,
put
but
you on the spot. That's my fault. I
sure,
apologize. There's so many,
so many. Yeah, so
amazing
many.
folks. The one that stands out in my mind, who's in the front of the camera, was Don.
Oh yeah.
Um,
You and I have talked about that at length.
could you reiterate a little bit of that
Sure.
here before we cross into Stargate? Because I
Yeah,
think that's,
Don was doubling Dana Elcar,
yeah.
who was the second lead in MacGyver. And so we had a great friendship and he was also stunt double for Dana. And then when it a decade later when we were casting the general for Stargate Command, um, I forget how Don's name came up. Maybe I forget exactly how it up, but I can tell you that it was a resounding yes, that's our guy. Because as you know Don really well. I mean, if Don was a real general, you'd go to war for him.
Yeah, yeah, you would follow that man into battle.
you'd follow that man into battle. I mean, Don was the greatest, strongest, nicest, most genuine guy on the planet. He was unanimous choice. I don't even remember anyone else being on the list, to be honest with you.
Brad Wright
It was
agrees.
always,
Yeah.
it was always Don, and Don, he's that special. And like I said, if it was a real-time war situation, you go to battle for him. You go to another planet for him. You travel in a wormhole for him. You do whatever it takes for Don. I mean, he was that kind of guy, and the spirit was huge.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
said he never had. He joked. I went back and watched a little bit of the interview that we shot with him in. God, brains don't fail me. I think it was '06, '07, and he joked about the fact that he would sometimes take a lot of takes, and from your recollection, he was
No,
kidding. That wasn't the case.
no, yeah, yeah. I think yeah. I don't remember a lot of takes with Don. He was
Yeah,
always a one take guy. As far as I remember, I don't remember doing a lot of retakes for him at all. He was gold.
he was gold.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Kate, do you have anything that you want to wrap up with Mike before we say goodbye to you?
No, I don't think so. I had a couple of questions that I gave to you about comparing what it was like working on in the 80s television versus high definition and special effects.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Kate. I mean, there is a big difference. We made the transition from film to digital. Actually, we were one of the pioneers of it with the Genesis camera on Stargate.
Yep.
Obviously, MacGyver was all film. But then on Stargate, the Genesis camera happened, which was a combination of Sony and Panavision getting together and creating this digital camera. Now, that first Genesis camera was not just a camera. It had an umbilical cord of cables that led to this bank of equipment that if we dollied the camera, we had to dolly this bank of equipment with an umbilical cord with it. So we had two dolly tracks. So double the grips, double the dolly grips, and we had to, it was a pain. So we made that transition, but we stuck with it. It was hard. And I remember being in the GVRD, which is this, forest, and having to lay two dolly tracks to do this simple tracking shot with this Genesis camera. But yeah, we made the transition to digital. And what that enabled us to do, what digital, as everyone knows now, enabled you to do was be able to do pretty complex visual effects, computer generated effects, pre-compositing, meaning, like a frame that you're seeing now, like we would just shoot a corner of it or half of it on stage, and then the other half in Stargate would be another world, or not even half. You could maybe even just shoot a little piece of the frame, but then the other, to fill out the frame, it was all computer generated. So the digital world enabled us to do that in a financially possible way for television, which, if we were still on film, it would have been very difficult to pull off some of the other worlds that we pulled off, and the visual effects and the incredible, action sequences, you know, um, with other worlds falling, to the wayside, below you
Hmm.
as they're, going through this action sequence. So digital gave us the opportunity to do that. And we ended up having, I don't know, some 20 some odd visual effects, people in our company. We lost a lot to digital ILM in San Rafael, because as they got more and more known on Stargate, they'd be handpicked, so we'd have to find more. But yeah, I mean, it gave us the ability to do pretty cool stuff. And but that's what also made it very, challenging on set, is now you're not just managing the filming of a scene, you're now managing this incredible digital matrix of shots, because sometimes there were sometimes there was 15 to 30 elements in one frame of so-called film. Yeah, so yeah, it was yeah, we had storyboards, all kinds of stuff to get through it. But the digital world made all that possible on a television budget, and I think we were one of the pioneers of that. Must have been
Well,
because that
yes.
camera sure felt like we were pioneers.
So 2000, season 4, there was an episode called Entity. It was pretty much completely self-contained inside of SGC, and Carter gets taken over by an AI from another world, and that was the episode that we found out later on was shot digitally. It was kind of a test for
Mhm.
this technology. I'm guessing that was the Genesis camera at this point before it became used in season 8 forward. You guys were doing HD
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah,
But talk about being on the frontier. It's just it's marvelous what you guys pulled
yeah.
off over the course of that run.
Yeah, it was. It was a great moment in television and film history to be there during all that and having all the tech savvy people that came from Paramount, I mean, sorry, Panavision,
Yeah,
came from Panavision and Sony and yeah, to get it all done, it was a great time. It was an interesting time, and we were all. I don't know if you remember this magazine called
yes.
Cinefex. That was I was consumed by that. I just would read it every night because it was I don't even know if it exists anymore, but it broke down how everyone shot everything, and we needed that. We needed that. I mean, I didn't know I vaguely knew what a pre-composite was, from my schooling and education, but until you're actually doing it, until you're like actually looking at a storyboard and filming just a piece of the frame,
Yeah.
and then you can see it all come together. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Extraordinary. Kate, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on and helping me with this episode because I really wanted someone with a MacGyver background who would do that series justice before we moved into Stargate. So it it means so much to me that you came on to help with us for
Me
this.
too.
Of course.
Kate knows more about MacGyver than I'll ever know.
There you go. Everyone, check out rdanderson.com. Rick uses that as his public-facing portal, and for all kinds of information on MacGyver and Stargate locations, very valuable resource. I recommend that you check it out. So thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
We talked about Dawn earlier. I think it would be an oversight, technically and profoundly, to not mention Legend.
Yeah,
Had Legend been successful, Jack O'Neill would have gone to someone else.
true.
And I am a huge John Delancey fan, and we were lucky enough to have him in the show for season 5. He
Um,
came in and did an arc. What was the magic of that show as far as you were concerned? And was it gutting that it didn't move forward the way it did? What were your recollections of Legend, if I may ask?
well, the irony of my career, and I think Rick would say the same, is that we did two of television's most iconic long-running series in MacGyver and Stargate, but our favorite was Legend, this
Yeah,
funny series that only went, one limited season.
yeah.
And but it was so special, so unique, so special. Written by Michael Piller from Star Trek
Yep.
and Bill Dial from WKRP in Cincinnati. So there you go. There's the combo plate. And it was just this real quirky, fun, um, I guess you'd call it a Western, but it was more than a Western. It was Rick's character was or characters. He played John Pratt, which was John Pratt? No, Ernest Pratt. Sorry. He played this character, Ernest Pratt, an ink-stained wretch of a dime novel writer who happened to write these novels like Ned Buntline, where he used his own picture as the hero. But the character that he wrote about, called Legend, was this superhero that would ride into town or drive into town on a steam powered car and solve whatever problem the town was having. Um, and it was just so much fun. So much fun. I had so much fun just watching Rick play these characters because he's really good at playing an ink-stained wretch of a alcoholic, womanizing gambler, you know. So maybe that wasn't that much of a stretch for him. But then he would evolve into this legend character, this funny hero, all dressed up hero. And it was just so much fun to watch. I mean, I was just grinning every day. I couldn't wait to get to the set. I couldn't wait to be there and watch these scenes evolve and this character evolve. And he was having the most fun of his life. I would bet to this day it was the most fun he's ever had on set doing anything. And to credit to Pillar and Dial, they let us do our thing. It wasn't written that way. It was written more like Bat Masterson. And I even think Bat Masterson was even a parenthetical in the original pilot script. But we crossed that out, and Rick made it his own. And there were a few little bumps in the beginning, but they really let us and Rick do his thing. And it was hilarious. It was hilarious. Have you seen them all?
I haven't, and you've convinced me to now pretty much drop everything and watch it. I didn't
You can buy
realize
on
that it
Amazon.
was your favorite. Right, yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
Amazon has the box. Well, it's not even a box set. It's all on one DVD now, I think.
I think it's
But
streaming on Prime, if I'm not mistaken. I'll find where it is.
it is a hoot. It is so much fun. We
Amazon
did,
Prime.
stuff like Knee High Noon. These were titles. Death and Life of Wild Bill Hickok. It just had every title and every story was a fun spin on history, and we just had a blast doing it. And so that's the irony is the shortest series we did was the most fun. And in retrospect, we got to do Stargate after that, so no hard feelings. But it would have been nice to have had Legend have its long run, which it deserved. Maybe we'll
Absolutely.
bring it back. Let's bring it back, David. Come
I
on.
wouldn't. I I would be down for that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
good.
Now, especially if you can tell when Rick is really into a story.
Yeah,
There's this twinkle in his, not that he's ever phoning it in because he's not, but there's this
no,
extra twinkle when
yeah,
he's across from someone like Tom Macbeth or Ronnie
yeah,
Cox. The
yeah,
man is chewing up the scene. And
yeah,
it's like, oh man, this O'Neill, two L's.
yeah.
There
Well,
is,
on Legend, it was like that every second. The
ah,
twinkle was there every second because he was having the time of his life. We all were.
yeah.
We all were. Yeah. It was incredible.
There,
Everyone should watch it.
absolutely. There is,
Forget White Lotus, watch Legend.
before I get further into uh, SG-1,
Yeah.
I've been privileged to, and the rest of us as the rest of us fans watching on this side, to receive so many wonderful anecdotes and stories over the years from this production. And I must say that this isn't the only show that I've covered in this kind of a format before, but when it comes to Stargate, the people who were involved, when we start talking about it, kind of lean back. And they have this place for it in their hearts that is separate from a lot of the work that they did. And I cannot tell you, Mike, time and again, the number of times where people have come onto the show to talk and they're like, you know what? That was something special. That was something really special. That was like a slice of time in my life that I got to do something that didn't feel like a job, that didn't feel, it was hard, but it didn't feel like people were beating their heads against the wall. And
No.
one after another, they attribute that to Richard Dean Anderson, Michael Greenburg, Brad Wright, Rob Cooper, and Jonathan Glassner. But particularly the ones who were on set, there was no bullshit. It
Yeah.
was, we're here, we're going to have a good time, we're going to work hard, but life's too short. If you're not enjoying the process, why are you doing it? You know,
Yeah.
find something that you love. You are worth finding something that you love. And if it's not here, you'll find it somewhere. But if you're here, if you're a part of this crowd, we're going to rib one another a little bit, and we're going to get our day. And
Right.
that was set at the top. And I think that you are a huge chunk of that. So I have to pat you on the back for, you know, setting up an environment. I think you said at some point, happy campers, happy camp, and that's really what it is. You
Yeah.
cultivated a good space.
Yeah. And it goes back to MacGyver and Legend and Stargate. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the way Rick and I roll. You know, it's hard enough to actually make the shots
Mm,
and make the scenes and you know tell the story. So you know you got to enjoy it along the way, or what's the point? And it's you know it was yeah, it may have been Rick and I, you know, sort of leading the circus, but it takes all the performers to have a great show.
when did you hear about Stargate SG-1 being developed? Was it when Rick got the offer? Take me
Yeah,
back.
I got a call from John Symes,
Okay.
who was president of MGM at the time. This is right after Legend. Was it after Legend? Or what did Rick and I had just come back? Oh, we had just come back from doing the Firehouse 2 hour pilot movie with Tom Fontana in New York City. We had just done that, and Les Moonves didn't pick it up for a
Okay.
series. It was a TV movie that was supposed to be a pilot for a series. Tom Fontana, you know, he did Oz and Homicide,
Yes.
and it goes all the way back to Saint Elsewhere. A good friend of mine. I've known him forever because Bruce Paltrow was also my mentor
Mm,
coming out of film school, and Bruce was a mentor of Tom Fontana's. So we all knew each other, you know, through Bruce Paltrow. And so we had just finished that 2 hour pilot, and it didn't go to series. It should have, because it was about a rescue firehouse in New York City 5 years before 9/11, and it would have been,
wow.
yeah, it would have been a first responding firehouse for
Wow.
9/11. It was way ahead of its time. And we cast people before Sopranos. We cast Michael Imperioli, Edie Falco. They were in this series, yeah, before Sopranos. So we had an incredible cast. Morris Chestnut was in it. Yeah, incredible cast. Anyway, long story short, that didn't happen. So we're back in LA, and I get a call from John Symes, you know, that they're going to make the movie Stargate into a series. Would Rick and I be interested? And so he asked me to run it by Rick. So I ran it by Rick, and Rick said no. He goes, I can't play that jarhead character like Kurt Russell did.
His hair is
Kurt was
straight up.
Yeah, Kurt was great, but I can't play that. I think he used the term jarhead. That's not me.
Yeah.
And so I had to call Science back and say, no, it's a pass. Rick doesn't think he can play that character. And then Science says, well, tell Rick he can make the character whatever he wants.
Yep.
So I called, have you heard this story? Yeah,
Nope.
so I called Rick back, and I said, John said you can make the character anything you want. So he thought about it more, and then I think John called back and said, "Oh, by the way, there's a 44 episode commitment, so you're guaranteed 44 episodes." And I think that's when we said, "Okay, yeah, we'll do it."
For
Because I
sure.
mean, at the time, I think I was offered, or I was in the running for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for 6 episodes, and then John came in with the 44, and and then right as you probably know, we were not even in the second season, and Showtime upped it to 88.
It was still in development in the first season, and you guys upped it to 88. And by I think the second season, you were signed on for a fifth year.
Was
It
it? Yeah,
happened very
something like that.
fast, and this would be unheard of now.
Yeah,
They make all kinds of promises and then pull them now,
yeah.
frankly.
Now it's all limited series. Yeah,
Exactly. But even then, it was still like, oh my gosh, they think that this thing has legs. The Outer Limits, Poltergeist, MGM was shooting all this stuff in Bridge, very successfully,
right.
and it was syndicating very well because that's how I discovered it. And I think they recognized that the MGM catalog was a gold mine, and Stargate was a big deal. Had you seen the film in advance?
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself a sci-fi fan, either geek or
No,
casual? Yeah.
no, not even. No, not even. No. Um, yeah. No, I mean, I did go to see Star Wars when it first came
Yeah.
out. I sat next to Cary Grant.
Oh
Um, that,
God.
that's all I remember about Star Wars. Premiere
Wow.
at Century City was sitting next to Cary Grant.
Yeah.
But yeah, um, yeah, no, I was not a big sci-fi fan. I became one, obviously, doing it. That's why I said
Right.
I'm so obsessed with this magazine, Cinefex, because that's
Yeah.
I had to dive into it full time, big time. Yeah, because yeah.
Was there a uh, Rick had made his stance on guns pretty crystal clear. Was there ever a concern? Okay, I'm going to have to fire one if I'm representing this U.S. Air Force paramilitary unit,
Yeah.
or was it just like, well, this is who this guy is. It's going to
Yeah.
fit because he's defending his people and defending civilians.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was all about the character.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Rick shares a lot of similarities and sensibilities to the MacGyver character, as far as animal rights and gun control and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But if you're in the service,
Mm-hmm.
you got to be able to shoot a P90, and he liked shooting P90s. Yeah. So, it's defense, you know. We were part of the Air Force, the
Right.
Stargate part of the Air Force. So, I'm an Air Force brat. I was born on Lackland Air Force Base.
Okay. My understanding was that, and I'd like you to fact check me if I'm wrong here, that the U.S. Air Force wasn't involved from the get-go. They got involved a little bit later. Or is that wrong?
Remember them, I kind of remember them always being involved
Okay.
because I always had the PR person was always a contact of mine from, I could be wrong, but I thought it was from day one, but
Okay.
Bright would know maybe more on that. But I always had to deal with the PR guys, and Brad had to get the scripts approved by them. Yeah, I don't know when that started though. You might be right. It might have been later,
It's
but
yeah. I
yeah.
I need to. I should have done a little bit more research into that because I've heard a couple of different things. So one of my huge. I want to have Doug Thar on so bad because he is was such a you leaned on those you could lean on those people to get a lot of those details correct, and in terms of like making sure that the protocols were followed, and there was the huge Jack and Sam shipper fandom. I mean, it's
Huh.
enormous, and a lot of those folks are like, can't they just please to get there together? And it's like they can't. He's her superior officer. It wouldn't work.
Yeah,
There's a lot
right.
of that. You had checks and balances in place to make sure that the story was authentic because you guys wanted it to be authentic.
Yeah, and there's a regimen to everything. And also they allowed us to film at Cheyenne Mountain. and
Yep.
inside Cheyenne Mountain, which is incredible. I mean, yeah, one of the most secure places on the planet we were able to film at and in. It was so the Air Force, they gave us a lot. Plus, they gave us the use of fighter jets. The two chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at different times, John Jumper and Mike Ryan, appeared on our show.
Yep.
Came and I became friends with them. Mike Ryan's actually from San Antonio, where I'm from,
Wow.
and John Jumper and I became friends, both real life chairman of the Joint Chiefs and four-star. I think Jumper might have even been a five-star general, the last five-star general. But
Wow.
anyway, they were part of the show, and we cast them as themselves. So the Air Force, and so the uniforms, yeah, the uniforms, and I think we were one of the first people to be able to use a P90 I referred to earlier.
Yeah.
But we were one of the first television shows to actually get that gun and were able to use it on screen, like when it first came out. So,
Yeah.
no, we got a lot of assets from being an Air Force show, and they really let us tell our stories. But they did, from time to time, keep it in line as far as the regimen of it all is concerned. Yeah.
Tell me about working with Amanda Tapping.
Oh, just the nicest person in the world. Just so amazing. And her Carter just speaks for itself. She's just a joy. She was, always 100% prepared, knew her character, knew her lines, delivered the scene better than you can ever imagine, just awesome. Awesome person, awesome actress, and now great director.
In her own right. She
Yeah.
is. I haven't been able to get her on in 5 seasons, not because she doesn't want to come on. She does.
No.
She's told as such, but she's so busy, and
Yeah.
she is in her world, and you can't. It's hard to feel sad about that because she's doing what she wants to do, and
Yeah.
uh, she's earned every bit of it herself. I
Yeah.
remember her having a conversation pretty early on about some of the earlier episodes in season 1 where it felt like they were writing Carter as a woman. And she had a conversation fairly early on referencing the folks like Sigourney Weaver and some of these other sci-fi staples. It's like, just write the character based on the situation. And by virtue of me being a woman, those traits will manifest. And
Mhm.
you could see very early on that was a note that was considered. And I think by midway through that first season, much faster than a lot of shows could indicate. Those characters are pretty much completely formed after just a few episodes. Some sooner than others, but that's a great cast.
Yeah. Um, she was amazing. Day in, day out, you could count on her. She was just never an issue, and which is important because at times we were like that plate spinning guy on the Ed Sullivan show where, you've got 20 plates spinning, all over the stage, and hers we never had to worry about.
And it's a lot of dialogue that she was holding in her hands.
Yeah.
It has
Oh
to
yeah.
come
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
exactly right. And not only that, but you have to believe it. And she made
Yeah.
it believable.
Yeah, and Michael too, in the same note, they carried a lot of dialogue, and because Rick and Chris didn't, but yeah, they had the bulk of the pipe, so to speak, to lay the story down, and yeah, they were brilliant at it, because they were Carter and Daniel Jackson, and they were
Mhm.
just perfect.
It took me a long time to, I think, admit to myself that my favorite character is Daniel. There, so much of the soul of that team is Daniel Jackson,
Mm,
and Michael was very young when he started.
yeah.
He not only he convinced me 14 years old at the time, that he was James Spader for
Yeah.
a few scenes until I was
Yeah.
like, okay, wait a second. It was that convincing a performance
Yeah.
because he just he receded into that role and made it his own. You know, the haircut and it went away, and a lot of the sneezing and things like that kind of fell by the wayside. And I guess Daniel found allergy medication, but that was an amazing part, and he really made it his.
You're right. And you know what? He did it from the audition on.
Wow.
It was like that in the audition. It was like we saw so many different people, and he just yeah, it was no doubt Michael Shanks in that role. He nailed it.
When you look back at, let me table that for now.
Mm.
The I I know Christopher Judge fairly well, and he has commented on the fact that he really loved uh, the opportunity to spend time with you and to get to go to fights that were, I think HBO was putting them on, if
My
I'm not
brother, yeah.
mistaken. Yeah, those are memories that he really treasures, and he really looks at the time on SG-1 as a real Shangri-La where everyone did great work but also remained human beings, because a lot of times
Yeah.
you can lose that in this business really easily.
Yeah.
Tell me about Christopher Judge.
Great guy. We shared sports together.
Yeah.
We were both athletes. He was a lot better than I was. Bigger, stronger, probably faster. But so we were both came from an athletic background, and I spent, yeah, as you know, the early part of my career in sports, and um, and then I evolved back into it the last 10 years actually. But so we had that commonality, and then my brother um, Ross was president of HBO and also executive producer of all the fights. So we would get these ringside backstage passes, and I'd take Chris and yeah, to all the big, huge fights, Pacquiao, Mayweather, all those big iconic fights my brother would put on and do. And yeah, and we were able to be ringside for that. So that was great.
Would
You
you
know.
sometimes have to pinch yourself? It's like, look at where we are. Look at what we get to
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
This is I'm
yeah,
blessed.
yeah. Yeah, I talk to my brother every day, and his career was just, a lot of people think mine's great, and which it is, and having done such iconic shows,
Hmm.
fortunately, luckily or whatever, it panned
Hmm.
out. But my brother equally, my brother is like I said, he's in two Hall of Fames. He's in the Boxing Hall of Fame and the Television Broadcast Hall of Fame because he's an innovator. He's not only an innovator, but he's a great storyteller. Maybe one of the best sports storytellers. He's won 57 Emmy Awards in documentary. And he's the guy that got me back involved in sports television. He's the guy who called me and said, I need someone like you, on the set to do these shows, Quest for the Stanley Cup, Road to the Winter Classic, Wired, NHL Revealed for the NHL. And we ended up doing probably 100 shows for NHL original programming. And it was all his, sort of his baby because he created 24/7, the whole behind the scenes storytelling technique with athletes telling their own stories through film. They weren't choreographed, they weren't orchestrated, they weren't written. It's all just, interviews or capturing moments in their time behind the scenes and during the games and on the bench or in the locker rooms. And so, yeah, it's been a real fortunate, career because you were able to tell stories, scripted and also non-scripted. And it's all about telling a good story. So hopefully, we've done that.
There is a fever to sports fandom, that is very similar to pop culture fandom. Um, One wears jerseys and the other cosplays, but the energy is the same. The endearing attraction to the material. I think that there, with especially with pop culture, it's always about the hero's journey in so many cases because of what it is the story that's being told, and the Stargate is exemplified of it. The hero, he starts off in one place, he goes through this thing, and transforms himself and a society, and then he comes back a changed person. I mean, it's that very much that arc, and there is similarly an excellence to the pursuit of attaining something greater than you currently are on the field or on a court. And I think that in with those characteristics in mind, I think that that's something that draws all of us together. We Rob Cooper said it to me. It's like we are drawn to competence, and I think when you see people who are pushing themselves to try to be the next best version of themselves, either in a scripted story or out on the field, I think that there's something very magnetic about that because we are drawn to that as people. We want to see ourselves be like that. And as storytellers, you get the opportunity to share insights behind the lines of when, what people were feeling and thinking, and in those moments of historic sports television and live entertainment. And there's something to be said there that I think really feeds the human spirit. Like, yeah, I'm going to have to go to work the next day, but I had that experience of seeing that guy on that field do that thing. I know he's been working that long to try and get that done. Maybe I can do that in myself with this thing that I'm trying to do over here. I think we can capture it and use those things in our daily lives. And I think it all just improves the David's going on way too long, the pursuit of excellence in ourselves, as well as what it is that you're documenting.
I agree. I mean, I think that shows like Drive to Survive on the F1, gives you an inside look at these drivers. So they're not just a helmet in this
That's right.
car going 200 miles an hour, but yet there's a person there. And if you don't know who the person is or care about the person, yeah, you can be a fan of him winning a race, but what if you really know the guy and have been through a little journey with him and you know his story? It just makes it that much more impactful and way better. And I think that's what my brother saw in that genre of 24/7, which is behind the scenes storytelling to um, and it may have gone back to my brother's early years with ABC Sports and the whole genesis of Up Close and Personal
Mm.
with Howard Cosell. How he used to get behind the scenes with Muhammad Ali and people like that. And yeah, because I agree with you. If you care about the athlete,
Mhm.
uh, in a story sense and character sense, you're going to cheer for him more and care more when he wins
It,
or more when he loses.
and that's why I love these conversations, is
Yeah.
because there's a reason that we love this. These things were
Yeah.
made by people.
Right.
Let's find out a little bit more about them because they
Right.
have stories that are worth telling too.
Yeah. I mean, story is everything. And
Mhm.
that's what I've always believed. My brothers always believed. And it's got to be worth telling.
What stories from SG-1 did you enjoy the most? Is there one or two that stand out?
Did like 250 something.
Yeah, I know.
What is
So
it?
no pressure, Mike.
I don't even, you probably know more about them than I do. I do remember some that I liked, like, aside from the ones that I helped write.
Of
But
course.
yeah, Crystal Skull I thought was pretty cool. And that actually, the Michael Shanks gave me some book some research book about the Crystal Skull and said, this should be a Stargate episode. And I read it, and he was right. And boy, was he right, because Steven Spielberg 2 years later did an Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. Now,
Exactly
whether
right. And your episode was better.
yeah, and whether he saw our show or not, I don't know. But yeah, it was a great. So that was a great concept. I'm not taking credit for it. Michael had the idea, and he gave me the book that had it all in there. The whole myth and legend about looking into a crystal skull and seeing UFOs. And that's a real thing. I mean, that's a real thing as far as,
The
the Ma-
concept.
the Mayan, yeah, the Mayan crystal skulls. That stood out. The upgrades written by David Rich. I think that was
Yes.
a really cool story where you put these arm pieces on, and you would be upgraded to this, superhero thing, which was way before Marvel movies. I thought that was very cool. Gosh, I don't know. We'd have to do a whole nother episode. I'd have to,
You know what? Let's table that then, because
yeah,
I would love to have you back in the future to talk about something more specific. And I know I last asked a lot of, out of you, front loading a lot of the stuff earlier on. So let's do that.
yeah,
I want to finish talking about mentors and the people who made us who we are. And I do. You sent me a beautiful list, just casually, and I want to go through some of it to give these
sure.
people their due. Um, do you have any, before we do that, do you have any memories of just being wowed by Rick during the production of SG-1? It's like, man, this guy is the right guy for this. I am just so glad to have this man in my life, and to be around this guy who doesn't take himself seriously at all. You could give him a compliment and it's like, I'm just doing me, because that's who he is.
Well, the biggest compliment I ever heard or ever thought, and it really rang true, was one year in Las Vegas at that big television convention. A a television executive stood up there in front of 1,000 people, and there was a question and answer, and the question was, what does it take to get a television series on and successful? And the executive, who had no ties to us at all, simply said, get Richard Dean Anderson. That was his answer at the NAB convention, one of those huge television conventions in Las Vegas. So, yeah, the question was asked, what's it take to make a television show, get it on the air, and then have it be successful? And his answer was, get Richard Dean
Hmm.
Anderson. So that's the biggest credit you could possibly give him. I mean, you know, he was bigger than life.
Yeah.
He in those characters. He did it in a personal way that the audience could relate to. Anyone in the audience, whether you're rich or poor, have a 13-inch television set or a 60-inch television set. He was a definite tune-in character, and that's why the shows were iconic, MacGyver and Stargate. That's why it's a credit really to him, because he's the face of the franchises, and he delivered it in a way that was personable, personal, and creative, unique at times, but always special. And I got to see it every day, and it was a joy to watch and be part of.
I
Yeah, so every day was special with him. Every day was special. He just delivered. He
yeah.
delivered in ways that you didn't see on the page.
And that's what it is. There is something I've been trying to, like, peg him for years, as you might imagine. And one day I hope to be able to ask him this question. Just one is, what is it that's running around inside your head, where, and I'm sure he wouldn't be able to just having him try to define it, I think would be interesting. Someone asked me once, what do you think's going on in Jack's head? And I said, I have no idea, but, whatever it is, I do suspect it's animated.
Yeah,
It has to be. It's too insane.
be
Because
a fan of that. Yeah,
God, it's funny, you know.
yeah.
And I don't know where he reaches to find some of these things that just come out. And I'll ask, right, one writer after another will come on, and I said, "Did you write this?" And they're like, "No, that was Rick." And
You
it
know,
just
he's
is.
really good. He's creative,
Yeah.
instinctive, and unique and
Yeah.
original. He's an original.
I'm looking at your list of mentors that you sent me. I want to wrap
Hmm.
up with this.
Sure.
Um, there are a number of people that you uh, shared with me who have guided you
Yeah,
to become the person that you are, and who you credit to the work that you've been privileged to do.
right.
Can you tell me about some of them and the impact that they've had on you?
Yeah. Well, starting with after the ski circuit was over and I came back to Hollywood, I worked for Lila Garrett, one of the pioneer female directors in television. And she saw potential in me that I'm not even sure I saw, but she
Mm-hmm.
saw. And we did this pilot together called Getting There that she wrote. John Aston directed it. And she got me into the Directors Guild during that show and as an AD. And she championed me from the beginning and gave me the confidence that yeah, I could actually make a living in Hollywood. Um, and then after Lila, it would be Don Ohlmeyer, who I had known briefly before because my brother and I used to do some, golf tournament, daily work through high school
Mm-hmm.
and but Don I met and he gave me the my first producing break on The Golden Moment. And then George England and Paul Newman. Then I went to Warner Brothers and worked with George England, who was best known for directing The Ugly American um, with Marlon Brando. And he was Marlon Brando's best friend. So I got to meet Marlon and spend some time with Marlon.
Mm.
I'm trying not to name drop, but I've been fortunate. It's been in my path. And
Yeah.
then Paul Newman and working with Paul in developing scripts for him through George England. Just the what it takes to make a good script great, or even a bad script great, or any script great, is and the what it takes for, to develop characters and arcs and stories and, in screenplay form to be, shot is a whole unique thing in its own right. And so, I learned a lot from George England as far as the screenwriting process. And I produced for him. I produced and line produced and produced, the TV movies. And we did the first IMAX scripted film together, the first one ever called My Strange Uncle. Yeah, we did it. It was all documentaries before 1980, and we did the first scripted IMAX film. And it was a short. It was only 30 minutes long, but we did it for Caesar's World. And so I got, at an early time in my career, I got to work with the IMAX camera and these 15 perf horizontal frames of film.
Is
So
it
I
as
would,
loud as they say that it is?
yeah, it was like a lawnmower. Yeah,
God.
even blimped. It was like a lawnmower. And we had this guy from IMAX with us on location in New Zealand because there's only four cameras and there was
Wow.
always four things filmed, three documentaries, and there was our
Yeah.
story film and one camera. And if it broke down, which it did, we'd have to shut down for hours while they put out this sheet on a driveway, and the technician would take the camera apart and put it back together so we can keep filming. So, that's you learn early, yeah, technical stuff like that. And so George was a big part of my production, life.
Mm.
And Bruce Paltrow, who I mentioned earlier. Bruce Paltrow was a mentor right out of college. And, I don't know if I told you the three pieces of advice he gave me, but he said, Mike, here's three pieces of advice for Hollywood. One, take the money. Two, take the money. Three, take the money. So I've tried to be true to Bruce's advice, and Bruce, I've taken the money. Um, and Yeah, so he was a big mentor. To a certain degree, Henry Winkler and Steve
Mm,
Downing and John Rich were mentors because they helped me be able to, because of their demand for excellence and quality, they helped me develop my instincts to constantly raise the qualitative bar daily. I have a saying that, make today better than yesterday
yep.
in production. And that's what I try to do every day. And so I'm always pushing the bar up.
Yep.
And I've talked about my brother, my younger brother is a mentor as well because of his ability to tell stories in the world of sports and with athletes. And some of the greatest stories are sports stories. And he's still telling them to this day. He just got a Netflix green light on the 99ers he did a documentary that won an Emmy called Dare to Dream about the 1999 women's soccer team, and they're doing that as a movie. So he's always been inspirational. And, we worked really closely for 10 years with the NHL telling the stories of the NHL. So yeah, a lot of help along the way, a lot of mentorship along the way.
No one goes it alone.
No, no, no.
We have to remember the people who helped get us where we are. I really appreciate you sharing each of them. That means a lot to have that as a part of this story. Do you think I always say never say never is always one of mine. Do you think that that you and Rick are done producing? Or do you think that there may be one day something like, you know what? Let's spend a few weeks on this. Let's go out
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, I mean, I have a writing partner that I've been writing with for the last 10 years, Gerard de Marigny, a very prolific best-selling novelist on Amazon. He wrote all the Chris De Niro novels. We've got a handful of projects. We even, wrote a new Stargate series spinoff that's at Amazon. I
I
don't,
didn't know
nobody,
this.
yeah, no one does.
I
No
do
one does.
now.
I don't, who knows if it'll ever happen? Who knows if anyone will ever open it up and read it, but it's written. It's pretty cool. I think it's really cool. So you never know. We're always, Gerard and I are always writing. We never stop writing. We've got quite a few projects going. And, so yeah, the gears are always turning. We're always writing. And, there's always a chance.
I'm sorry, Michael. I'm going to have to back up for a minute. Was Jack in this?
Um, was he? Will he be?
No, no, no. What it was that you created that you pitched to Amazon was Jack a part of that story?
Well, you mean is he? It hasn't been made. It
I
hasn't been.
understand. I understand. But the what it was
Yeah,
that you pitched was
yeah, he's
Jack in
in
there?
there. He's in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I at this point, um, it could go either way with it. Sooner or later, Amazon will choose to do something. I always hold out hope that it's going to be something from the old guard, but I understand if they wanted to go in a new direction. But just that nugget that you guys pitched something, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Oh,
So
yeah. It's sitting there. So, and I think it's very special. It's unique. It's very cool concept. So we'll see. We'll see.
how long
Right
ago was
now,
that you submitted?
it's been a while.
Okay,
It's been months.
okay,
But and we haven't heard anything.
okay.
But yeah, it's there. So right now, I mean, Amazon just bought MGM, as you know, And so there's this whole, whatever it takes to gear up. But as you know, Stargate is as it is with the 250 plus episodes, it's generating so much uh income now, and they're not spending anything. So, they'd have to have the desire to, make another iconic series and, reap the benefits from that. So I
Exactly.
guess that's a big decision for them. Yeah.
Yeah, whether you are riding into town on a horse-drawn carriage or on a early industrial motorized carriage, or flying over a planet in the Starship Enterprise, or coming through on a Stargate, there are stories to be told.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think we're done with Stargate. I think it's just a matter of when they decide to move forward with it. And I'm glad that you submitted that story, or that you submitted an idea to them, because I know how much love that you have for this, not just the IP, but for the fandom. You guys,
Yeah.
the reason that you guys did a 200th episode and did it as off the wall as y'all did was because you recognized that you wouldn't have been there without uh, this groundswell of people who rose up underneath you to embrace the show, and to have filmmakers who really appreciate the fans that way, and to come on 25, 30 years after to share some time with one of them, and ostensibly then many of them, to have a conversation about the work that was done. I am so thankful for, and I really appreciate you taking so much time to be with us today.
Oh, yeah. Well, you'll always be part of it.
I appreciate that. You guys made something special, and something that, in many respects, is more is more relevant in modern times than it was even then. There is something evergreen about this show, and so much of great storytelling that it continues to resonate into the future. And much of it may be a product of its time, but there's always something that can be discovered by new fans and rediscovered by old ones. So, Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. You're the best.
That was Michael Greenburg, writer, director, executive producer. This was a treat. I am so fortunate to be able to sit here and receive these stories in decades after the fact, where people are still willing to share their memories of a production that so many of us hold in our hearts as such special entertainment. The work that they did was magic, and I think it's why it continues to hold up, why so many people continue to discover it, and why it still holds so much meaning. So it meant the world to me that Michael was willing to come on and share his story with us here. I do not go it alone. As I think we mentioned on the show, there's so much that goes into production just in getting these stories out. And I must thank my production team for helping to make this possible week in, week out. Anthony Rowling, Kevin Weaver, Summer Roy, Bryce Orrs, they make the show work. My moderators, Anthony, Jeremy, Kevin, Lockwatcher, Marsha, Raj, and Jacob. Frederick Marcoux over at Concepts Web, who keeps dialthegate.com up and running. And my wormhole extremist partners in crime, Nicole Rodriguez Galdo and Yvonne Cahill, Evie. We're continuing to do our Stargate rewatches over there. All those links are in the description below. It meant the world to me that Mike was able to do this episode, and I'm so privileged to now add it to our collection of stories. And if we're lucky, maybe we'll have him back. I can still hope that we'll get Rick one of these days, and it's who knows what the future will bring. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gates. I appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you on the other side.